Welcome to CityCast Denver. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. So today we're talking about the mayor's State of the City address and his big promises, the newest candidate to jump into the race to be mayor, and we'll dig into a new poll showing we're kind of proud to be Coloradans. Joining me today is Denver Post City Hall reporter Elliot Wensler. Hi, Elliot.
Hello, Bree. Happy to be back.
Good morning. Okay, before we get into it, really quick, check out our Keep It Local weekly newsletter, lands in inboxes every Thursday, sponsored by the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity and Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. This, if you have not read it, is our weekly newsletter highlighting cool local businesses, written by our newsletter editor, Michelle Palizzi. This week, Michelle rounds up the best places to get your craft on and meet some new friends while you're at it. So be sure to check out Keep It Local. Okay. Big story today, Elliot. We're talking about the Mayor Mike Johnston's State of the City. A lot going on in here. Some big takeaways to me, at least, was this plan to deliver universal childcare in the city if he's elected a second term. Vague on specifics. That was a big takeaway for me as a parent. What were your big takeaways from his address to us, the city?
Yeah, that was definitely the first one for me. Like, that was our headline. Once we were able to get a story up, that was what we led with, because I do think a lot of people are really interested in this. You know, we talked about it, what was it, last week? Sometime recently I was on the show and we talked about some developments with childcare. And those stories have been doing really well. And I think people are really interested in that issue. It's also something that Democrats nationally are talking about more and more. So it was interesting to see that come up locally. And so, we should definitely talk about that. And then also he talked about this concept of the Mile High line, which
okay.
all of us in the press were kind of like, what is this? Like, what is the Mile High line? And is it an actual line? And does a line need to be straight to be a line? Because basically it's this new term that the mayor is using for this group of 7 developments throughout the city that he wants to concentrate housing around.
Huh.
So that was another thing that he talked about. We can kind of jump into both of those a little bit more.
Sure. Let's start with the childcare really quickly, because I think as he is wont to do, he announced, we'll do a listening tour, we'll form a task force, we'll develop a program to cut the red tape, build the pipeline. And to be fair, he says he wants to make care affordable and accessible for all Denver families within the next 5 years. And I have to say, if I was a current childcare provider, I would feel a little frustrated by this plan, because I'm especially tuned into this as a parent. I'm especially tuned into this because the woman that runs the school and daycare where my son goes to is like a very vocal advocate for this issue. So I hear about it a lot from the back end, the administrative side. And like, there's plenty of information out there. Like, I don't think necessarily that folks would say a listening tour is needed, but I also think this is his approach to things.
I think that it feels like more and more just every government initiative these days is going to have like a listening tour element at first. And then the other kind of classic part of it, which is the task force, which always seems to come with these big policy moves. And I think frustrates some folks who follow policy closely, because it's always like, why does there need to be a task force first? Why can't you just like take action? But I think, they would say they need to like really study this and figure out what the plan should be. All of this is supposed to be somewhat in place by next fall for a pilot program. So we don't have a ton of details on how extensive that pilot program would be or what exactly it would consist of, but that does give us a bit of a time frame for how quickly they're expecting to, start having something that's actually actionable. And then depending on how that pilot program goes, putting this in place.
Yeah, I understand the piloting process is like trying out a system that we are creating for the first time, but like, again, these things already exist. Last week we talked about this a small cut to the cost of operating a childcare business here in Denver, which is something that City Council did. And that was sort of a small first step. I guess my hope is that this task force goes quickly and they can really lean on what has already been found through the folks that are already doing this work, and they are just jump right in full force. Because the other funny thing about childcare is it changes every year for everybody. Like, my kid doesn't need it now, but a kid in 5 years will. But it doesn't fix the immediate need for a lot of folks I know who are like, I literally just can't afford to work and need all that time at work to pay for the childcare that I can't afford to begin with. So
Right. Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see.
I wonder if it's almost like people who are just even thinking about getting pregnant are maybe like, oh, maybe by the time.
No, I mean,
You know?
totally. I know this is a huge question for a lot of folks in general, is the affordability of a child. Can I
Right.
afford to have another one or my first one? And childcare is a huge part of that. Can I afford that? Or if I have 2 kids in childcare, that's twice as expensive. Like, we're just looking at, our son is going into kindergarten in a month. That's saving us $800 a month. And we have a very small childcare bill. So I'm excited for that. I can't imagine how it would feel for someone who's paying $1,500, $3,000 a month for childcare. So, I mean, fingers crossed something quickly happens. But let's talk about this, the mile high line, the Denver line.
Yes. Yeah. No, it makes sense to stumble over it a little bit because it's kind of confusing. At first I was like, is this like a train line? Is this like another train? But no, it's basically just this line of developments. They pulled up a map that showed the line, and it is like, it's a crooked line. But these are the developments that are included. Okay. Park Hill Park, National Western Center, 16th Street Mall / like downtown, Ball Arena, Santa Fe Yards, where the new women's soccer stadium is going to be, Burnham Yard, and Old Mile High. So not exactly in that order, I guess, but you can kind of think about like where those all are. They're kind of like somewhat along I-25.
And they're big projects that are in various stages.
Yes. His focus is tying all of those together and making them connected to one another, both via transit, because all of them are along kind of RTD transit lines, and then also adding like pedestrian and bike infrastructure. And then the biggest element just being a lot more density of housing. So he said he wants to build 20,000 units of housing throughout all of these different developments, and the city will help encourage that housing through a couple different mechanisms, one of them being just giving developers the land for free, since that tends to be one of the most expensive costs, and then hoping that that makes the housing that comes out of it much more affordable.
I'm skeptical again because, yes, land is expensive, but materials are expensive. Labor is expensive. We talk about this all the time when we talk about housing being built, and it has to be a return on investment for the developers. And if it isn't, then affordable housing is not necessarily prioritized, or it's the bare minimum that's required by the city. So I guess my concern would be, are we going to see another dashboard that's tracking this that necessarily doesn't feel like in the actual being a person in the city, is it making that much of a difference? But I don't want to be that skeptical because those are all major projects we're watching anyway.
Right.
And if they could all be connected and maybe housing be a priority for all of them, great.
And one thing I want to single out from all of that is I just threw in there Old Mile High, and some folks might be saying, what are you talking about? What's Old Mile High?
Yes.
This was the first time that the mayor has actually laid out his plan for what is currently Empower Field and where the Broncos' home stadium is. So if the Broncos do go through with their plan to move to Burnham Yard by 2031, that means that that current stadium site, the land, which is like 85 acres, will be returned to the ownership of the city. And then the city can kind of do whatever it wants with it. And we've known that for a little while, and we've been wondering, like, what are they going to do with it? Is it going to be sold? Is it going to be developed? And so this was the first time that we heard that the mayor wants it to be developed. And he talked about there being, again, a huge listening tour, a community conversation that takes place on the west side to hear about what do folks want that piece of land to look like. You know, do they want more grocery stores, more parks, more housing? And so we're going to get to see that as another major development that starts to kick off.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's also a sea of parking lots on top of this stadium that will be disappearing. So that 85 acres, it's a lot. And it's a lot of the existing Sun Valley neighborhood. And I know those folks are very involved in these processes. And I live a couple minutes from there. I travel through there a couple times a week to go downtown. And it's always been like gosh, this sucks. There's so much parking when it's not being used at all. But this could be the next big thing that, I don't know, delivers what we really need. I'm always hoping every big project is something that we really need.
Totally. And I think the West Side is really hungry for something that makes them feel more tied to one another and to central Denver. We've heard about that in so many different areas. So, it has the potential. Obviously, there's going to be so many conversations that have to happen to figure out what is actually going to go there. But I think it's really interesting to imagine the potential for that site. Now that it's out there, I'm sure we'll start hearing more and more.
Yeah. And again, that separation you were talking about, the West Side wanting to be connected, it's cut in half by I-25. The parking lot situation. I mean, there's so much urban infrastructure that has separated all of us for so long that it would be cool to see something connecting. Well, we'll be watching that. We'll be watching this childcare situation. I will be very closely. I'd love to hear what you all think. Did you watch the Mayor's State of the City? What were your takeaways? Is there something that we're missing that he said that really struck you? Give us a call, 720-500-5418. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're talking about the latest person to step into the mayor's race. Okay, we're back. Earlier this week, Chantel Lewis, who is Denver City Council representative for District 8 in Northeast Denver, announced her run for mayor. She's currently in her first term as a council member, which goes to July of next year. She's previously been the vice president of the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless and served on the RTD board as well, which is actually where I first met her and interviewed her on my old podcast like 8 years ago when she was in the RTD race, which we will talk about in a little bit. But Elliot, you spend a lot of time in the presence of city council. Were you surprised by this announcement?
It's an interesting question. I hear lots of rumors in my job all the time. I'm hearing little snippets here and there from folks. So I had heard that maybe someone on council was considering a run for mayor, and then I'd heard that it might be Councilwoman Lewis. And when I first heard that, I was like, I'm not totally shocked by that. I just think that it makes sense. As far as if you're just looking at everyone on council and you think through the different profiles of who maybe would be considering a run, I think Councilwoman Lewis made the most sense. But it's interesting. She actually didn't announce her candidacy initially. She filed for it, and we saw the filing before there was any formal announcement from her, which is just a really interesting move for a campaign. Usually these things are very orchestrated with a big event.
Sure.
And we didn't see that this time around. And so I think just as someone who watches a lot of these, that's something that I'll be looking at is just how does this campaign maybe differ than others?
I think too, something else, I think when you're talking about who might run for mayor, she's talked a lot about housing issues on council, work towards issues like that. Her district itself, District 8, is a concentration of Mayor Johnston's current shelter approach to homelessness, with several hotels in her district serving as shelters. Denverite reported in 2023 that nearly half of the city-funded shelter beds and units, more than 2,000, were in District 8, mostly on the border of Northeast Park Hill. And I know she's been a critic of the mayor's choice to place so much responsibility in her district. I mean, how do you see this? I think, to me, housing issues seems like a perfect platform for her because of this direct experience.
Yeah, she definitely has not shied away from criticizing that element of the mayor's plan. That's something that she's butted heads with the administration on several times, but she's also butted heads with them on many different topics that I could see any of those being something that she focuses on. It's important to remember that when she ran for council, she was endorsed by the Denver chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. And I think that's an important factor here because obviously we just saw a really high profile win of a DSA endorsed candidate, Malak Kuros, in Denver recently. So, the first thing that came to my mind is this going to be, a DSA run against the mayor now that Malak Kuros successful. And so I think a lot of those issues that we hear about when we think about DSA will likely be things that she focuses on.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we also don't know if the Denver DSA is going to endorse her.
That's a good clarifying point because,
Yeah.
like you said, also Chantel and Councilwoman Sarah Parody were the only DSA-backed candidates to win locally in 2023. And like you said, Maylot Quiros was this example of Denverites being on board to be represented by a Democratic Socialist in Congress. But I do wonder what the appetite is in Denver for a city leader that leans that direction. I mean, the congressional race that Maylot is now in as the primary winner is still majority of Denver. That's Denver voters made that decision.
Right.
So I think it is a different context than when we were talking about it in 2023, right? It's like DSA maybe seemed more fringe or just not as well known to folks. And now it's like very well known. I think people are understanding that this arm of the Democratic Party is what a lot of folks are really looking for. And I wonder what that means for in a race against an incumbent like Johnston. 8 other candidates have already filed. A lot of these are the same players from previous runs. So I don't know. Also, like Mayor Johnston's first term incumbent, Hancock ran 3 terms, 12 years. And he was definitely challenged, but not by this many people, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And there's going to be so much more time to talk about all of this in the months to come.
We know very little, to be fair.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to see. I mean, there could be even more candidates that run for that seat. But I mean, also going back to what we talked about with State of the City, I did also ask the mayor around universal childcare. I said, is that something that, or did your speech change at all after the primary win, was what I asked him. And he said, no, this is something that we've been working on for a long time. But I couldn't help but ask that question because, obviously we just saw Denverites make a pretty strong statement about what their values are and what they want to see happen.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that shapes this mayor's race, in the next year or so as it moves on. Something I want to talk about with Chantel was she was on the RTD board from 2019 to 2022. During her run for that campaign seat, it was revealed in 2008 that she had stolen money from the Department of Human Services. To quote Denver Post coverage of this in 2018, and I remember this information being dropped right in the midst of the campaign. And Denver Post reported, quote, Lewis admitted to an investigator that while working for DHS, she looked for inactive benefits accounts and issued cards to use those people's food assistance and other benefits, according to a police affidavit. I want to acknowledge, too, she was extremely transparent about the situation when it was revealed. And I don't think it honestly had the intended effect of whoever wanted that out there. It didn't. She won. She still won. And I wonder, could that factor differently in a mayor's race versus a council race? Because I think the fact that she and her campaign are embracing it and are very transparent about it has a message in itself. But I wonder how you think that would play out in a mayor's race.
Yeah, well, another interesting thing that happened when her campaign first kicked off is her website had this word bubble. Did you look at this?
I did, the word cloud.
That was like people were able to the prompt was like, I think in one word, what does Denver need? And I think the hope was for people to say values that they wanted to see in Denver. And it got out of hand pretty quickly. I'm not sure if it's still active, but people kind of hacked the system and were putting just whatever they wanted, some of which was just kind of, a juvenile, Chantel sucks. Some of it was referencing what you're talking about and had things like Chantel steals and some of that. And she actually read those comments aloud on her Instagram page, including the ones that referenced this issue, which I thought was really interesting. She just called attention to the fact that people are, referencing this case from years ago. And so that's just sort of again, not something that you often see in these types of campaigns. As far as how it might affect her actual candidacy, I think it's obviously already coming up. People are, she's talking about it. People in her word cloud are talking about it. I also think if she continues her candidacy, which of course I have no reason to believe she wouldn't, there's a possibility of there being a legal challenge to her being able to hold the position.
Like it could be a disqualifying element for this particular race, because I should say after this information came out, she won her RTD district board seat. She went on to win her seat in District 8. So
right, and to be in city council.
Yes.
Yes. So the Colorado Constitution restricts anyone who has been convicted of embezzlement, public money, bribery, perjury, solicitation of bribery, or subordination of perjury from holding any office of trust or profit in this state. So that's like the specific language. It's very legalese, but the Colorado Sun had a story about this back in 2018 and kind of looking at whether there could be a legal question brought. And at the time, I don't think anyone actually ever filed any lawsuit, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened for something like a mayor's election, which is much more high profile than RTD or even city council.
Sure. It's bigger stakes. I mean, you'd literally just have more voters, contemplating voting for you versus just your district or even just the RTD board, which just doesn't get as many folks engaged as a mayor's race is going to.
Right. And I don't think that it's like lawyers at the time didn't say this is absolutely disqualifying, but they were like, it's a question. It could be or it could not be, and it might just depend on what a court decides. So that could be a really interesting element if that does play out in this race.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching that. Obviously, we are watching the mayor's race, seeing who else is going to jump in and what the conversation is going to be like. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're talking about a new poll about how Coloradans feel about Colorado. Okay, we're back. So a new survey was released from the bipartisan Colorado Polling Institute this week to use CPR's headline about it. Quote, most voters are somewhat proud to be a Coloradan, recent poll finds. So roughly 650 voters participated in this poll, which found that 84% of registered voters said they're proud to be Coloradans, and that 56 of those are extremely or very proud. This was just such a funny headline to me. I think the other big takeaway was that 1 in 3 people had not heard of Colorado's big 150th birthday coming up, which there's been a lot of booster, like the city, the state is talking about it. There's events, there's all kinds of things, but people are still necessarily not even hearing about it. And I wonder how that plays into this, like, how proud we feel to be from here. What did you think about this, Elliot?
And I think it was less than a third of voters had heard about it.
So less than a third had even heard about the birthday celebration.
Yeah, I mean, I had definitely heard about the birthday celebration, but I really didn't know. I am very plugged in, and also
I was going to say we're the worst judges of this because we literally pay attention to the news for a job.
But still, I pay attention to the news for a job, and still, I couldn't have told you well, here's all the big things that are going to be happening in this celebration. So I actually went and looked at what some of the events are, and also, to be fair to our reporter Nick Coltrane, who wrote about this, he also flagged these for me, and I thought they're really interesting. There's going to be a gnome scavenger hunt in Littleton beginning this week.
Because there's like a gnome society thing over there.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
There's going to be a dollhouse miniatures exhibit in Lakewood.
Yes,
which
at
is
the
cool.
the Dollar Miniature Museum has like Colorado in miniature.
Yeah,
it looks very cute.
Which is like a very cool way to celebrate the state. And then Threads of Arvada, a community quilt challenge for our crafters out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds so wholesome a little bit. That feels very small town to me in a way that I like. But
so anyway, I just wanted to highlight that there are some really interesting events that are happening. But yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer that there's not more excitement about this and that folks don't seem to be that plugged into it.
Do you think this has anything to do? Because there was this other piece that I thought was interesting. 84% of people polled said they were proud to be a Coloradan compared to 75% being proud to be an American. And I wonder if there's just the general tenor of how we feel about where we live right now is everybody's maybe a little meh because America maybe feels a little meh to a lot of us. It's much more complicated than that. I don't want to oversimplify it, but I just wonder if pride of where we're from or where we live is in a weird place right now.
I wonder if it's also just that Coloradans are so like the reason that a lot of people said that they were proud was because of the outdoors. So I wonder if it's also just people like not knowing about events that are happening in the cities because they are planning to be out in the outdoors and they're just like not really paying attention to events that happen in the city.
No, that's a good point. I feel like you're the perfect encapsulation of what they said, which was folks were most proud of our outdoors and our nature and our progressive policies. You're a trail runner. I know this about you. You like being outdoors, right? And then you cover the progressive policies that we, so I don't know, you're kind of in both of those worlds, and that does feel like very Denver or very Colorado.
Yeah, which I know that there's like a lot of frustration about that. I think in some of the like Denver progressive and other circles where people are like, I wish people would just like hang out in the city rather than wanting to go outside all the time. But it's like the outdoors are really good. As a lover of the outdoors myself, it's like, it's especially when it's so hot in Denver, it's really tempting to just like want to go spend your weekends up where it's a little bit cooler. But all this to say, I had a different takeaway from the poll that
Tell me,
I thought was interesting, which was that the pollsters seemed to find that there was actually like sort of a note of optimism more than they normally see, including that 70% of people felt that Coloradans had more in common than what divides them, and 77% said they felt Americans have more in common than what divides them, which the pollsters were like, that's higher than we expected. And it was also a bit higher than I would have expected with how, divided things feel. Yeah. But that kind of feels like a positive note.
I was going to say that sort of flies in the face of my theory of like, are we feeling bummed about where we live because of what's going on? But maybe that optimism component is people seeing their own communities or, seeing the benefits and the values of what they have built here in particular,
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, I always just kind of, sometimes I'm not cynical enough for a journalist because I'm like looking for the silver lining sometimes. And I thought that was nice. And then also that more than 60% of those who were polled felt that the state's and America's best days are still ahead, which I was like, that's lower nice. than the 70 and 77%, but still that's like, seems like a pretty high number for people to, have this sort of hopeful look for the future of our state and our country.
That's a nice thing to end on because I do want to be hopeful and I do love this place. I'm super proud to live here. Obviously, I mean, we talk about this place every day. It's our jobs, whether you're covering what's actually happening on the legislative side or like just the fun stuff we like to do here. And that makes me feel a little bit better. Maybe we're doing all right.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear what you think. What do you think about this new poll? Does this reflect how you feel about living here in Colorado? Let us know, 720-500-5418. Elliot, thanks for joining me.
Always appreciate it, Bree.
And now, check out my sponsored interview with Elizabeth Martinez of Compass Real Estate, where we talk about how cool it is to live in the Berkeley neighborhood. Hey, Bree here with Elizabeth Martinez, real estate broker at Compass. Elizabeth, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Hey, Bree. It's so good to be here.
So what neighborhood are we talking about today?
So we're heading to Northwest Denver to Berkeley.
Ugh, beautiful neighborhood. Start off. What is your favorite piece of history about Berkeley?
Oh, there's a lot there, but mostly that it was an alfalfa farm in the late 1800s. And then it was the town of North Denver in 1892. And then it became the city of Berkeley in 1898. And it didn't actually become part of Denver until 1902.
Oh, so it's had a little bit of history before it became an official part of Denver. So it's kind of one of our older neighborhoods.
Exactly. Yeah. So it really got connected as a suburb with the streetcar coming up to Northwest Denver. And also because Reelection established in 1890. And so that was an attraction to bring the streetcar.
We're talking about the previous Reelection at 38th and Tennyson, which you can still see remnants of today. I think folks will know there's a Sprouts there and there's housing and such.
And there's a theater. And I just did a ghost tour there. Well, not a ghost tour. It was a paranormal tour. And it was amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. So let's talk about Berkeley's architecture. The neighborhood is full of craftsman bungalows and brick cottages from the early 1900s. What should buyers know about this part of the neighborhood?
Berkeley was its own city before it was part of Denver. And Denver had what we call a brick ordinance, where you had to make your home out of fire-resistant materials. And so in this area, we actually have a lot of wood siding homes, bungalows, that you don't see in a lot of the same era of other sections of town. That is unique to this area. And then we have Tennyson Street, which is covered in newer condos and townhomes. And the streets that flank Tennyson, like Stewart and Utica, those have a lot of newer duplexes built in the last 10, 15 years, since in 2010, we had zoning changes that allowed for more density along that corridor.
And what kind of buyer would gravitate towards Berkeley?
People that love walkability for everything. You just pop over to Tennyson, Lowell, or 44th for a variety of things like breakfast at Bakery 4, or call your mother, grab some vegan lunch at Vital Roof, or go to the handful of ethnic dining options from Thai to Parisi, which I hope it gets back on its feet. But there is just so many options for food. And then you have exercise options galore, yoga, Pilates, Alchemy 365, plate strength. And then you have shops, Inspire, Miller Lane, Farrell, Berkeley Supply, Jolly Goods, like just a ton of amenities.
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful neighborhood for that walkability component for sure. So what is the price range for a home in Berkeley right now?
So in Q2 of 2026, in Berkeley, for all homes sold in RE Colorado, which is our MLS, the average close price was $893,000. So entry level is about $600,000. The highest sold in Q2 was $1.7 million. And so far in 2026, 70 of the 102 homes sold were under $1 million. I'm just saying that so that you kind of see that even though it seemed like a little bit that everything was $1 million, it's kind of squeaked down, which has been nice. So you can get an affordable house over in this area.
Well, Elizabeth, this was so helpful. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
And again, you can check out elizabethmartinez.co to learn more. We'll have a link for you in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell a childcare provider about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe to our morning newsletter at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye.